So just to welcome you all then, thanks for joining us. We have a really exciting panel today, and I can see them all, and I'm sure you can too at the bottom of your screen. We've actually got 5 panelists. My name is Thomas Mason, and I am going to be chairing the discussion today. I'm working with Lania Walker from HouseSit Match on her team to help her get her name and the exciting brand that is HouseSit Match out to the public and the concept of house sitting. So we're going to be joined by Lamia shortly. Before we go to Lamia, though, we just want to kind of pick up the idea of this industry that is a really new, exciting industry. We think it's part of something in the big picture called the sharing economy. You may have heard of the sharing economy if you've ever used a Zip car to get from A to B, if you've ever used a Boris bike in London, if you've ever gone on Airbnb, perhaps to stay somewhere without wanting to go to the expense of a hotel. So the idea really is the sharing economy is bringing people together to use up spare capacity and to help them save money and perhaps even live a whole lifestyle. And we've got a few professional sharers today we're going to be joined by. So on our panel today, and if those people can just wave and say hello when I mention them, we have Janine Marsh. She is a member of the British Guild of Travel Writers. Are you there, Janine?
I am. I'm in France, so I think my lines are a bit iffy. We've got big storms here, so perhaps a bit of delay.
Well, I think we can see you fine, so try not to worry too much about that.
Okay.
Then we have Lamia Walker from HouseSit Match. Are you there, Lamia?
I am. Hi, everyone.
Hello there. Lamia's, we can see lots of post-it notes and ideas from Lamia in the background, so she's going to bring us lots of fresh ideas today. We're also privileged to be joined today by David the Dogman. David is a presenter at Talk Radio Europe. He's joining us from near Marbella at the moment. Are you there, David?
Yes, and I'm also a canine behaviourist.
Canine behaviourist, right. So he's going to help keep the panel behaving well today, we hope. Then we have Rachel Trimmer Morgan. Rachel is director of the Career Break site.
Hello, it's Morgan Trimmer, by the way.
Rachel Morgan Trimmer. I do apologise.
Thank you. Okay.
So Rachel's from the Career Break site. She's going to be talking about the opportunity for affordable travel and saving money while you travel, and a lot of the industry around that. And then last but not least, we have Ruth Johnston, who is a blogger who goes by the name of Explorer Mum. If you listen to Ruth, she actually has an Australian accent, but apparently is currently in France on her travels.
That's correct. House sitting in France.
Yeah, it looks quite French, actually, those stairs behind you.
Yes, it is. It's a turn of the century French farmhouse. It's just gorgeous.
Wonderful. All right. So what we want to talk to you today is about the concept of house sitting. Joining us on the panel, it's something you may have tried, it's something you may never have done before. But essentially what it does is it gives you an opportunity to dream that you can travel the world, have fun, and maybe do it actually 1/3 of the cost of paying rent to stay at home, perhaps in Britain, perhaps in Spain, perhaps in Australia. There has been a study by Pet Sitters International suggesting that actually this is a £200 million global growth industry, and there's something like 720,000 homes at the moment that are being shared and that you can go to sit. So if you come and get involved in house sitting, you're really by no means narrowing your options, but there's the whole world of choice there. And that we also wanted to address, we don't just want to say, oh yes, house sitting, isn't it a wonderful thing? I think people do, when they're looking at sharing their most prized possession, which is their house, they have a few concerns about peace of mind. You know, what's going to happen when I go travelling? Is everything going to be safe? Am I going to come back to a house? Are my pets going to be happy if I have pets? But it does address a number of pain points, and one of those is actually not having to rely on the goodwill of neighbours, family and friends. So we just want to make sure that we think about some of those pain points as we go through. So first of all, on our expert panel then, I'd like to go to Janine Marsh. Janine, as mentioned, is a member of the British Guild of Travel Writers. And I think Janine was, as a writer, one of the first people to pick up on the trend of house sitting across Europe. So maybe, Janine, you could tell us a bit more about when the term house sitting was invented and how it came about and why it was of such interest to you.
I came across it because I met some house sitters in France a few years ago, and I've never heard of this before. they were helping someone who was setting up a yoga retreat. They were Irish, young girls. They'd come over and they were having a whale of a time. And I thought, what a brilliant idea. You know, they didn't have a huge amount of money, but they were desperate to travel, desperate for new experiences and to see the world. And here they were being hosted by, in a family in France who set up a yoga retreat, needed to get away, and weren't prepared to leave it all being left behind with nobody looking after it. So these two young girls were there. They were helping with the builders. They were helping with the people that were arriving. And it was a really interesting idea to me. That's quite a hard one to sell. But most people I've come across just do it for pet sitting and also jeep sitting. A lot of people can't get away from home. They might have an emergency, they might have to go travelling, and they don't want to leave their business, they don't want to leave their homes, they don't want to leave their pets. They don't want their grass to grow up to their knees by the time they come back. And so getting people to HouseSit is a perfect opportunity for those people who want to travel on a budget and see the world as a local, and people who need help. And I think for me, the biggest thing that came across is that anyone who HouseSits lives the life of a local. Most people you HouseSit for will share their favourite bakeries, their favourite butchers, the secret places that you never get to see when you go on holiday, because you don't have the time to find out. As a house sitter, you see all this stuff. And I researched it independently. I wasn't paid to research it, it was for my own interest because I think it's a really interesting concept. And I tried desperately hard to get some negative feedback from the people I spoke to, both house sitters and people who wanted house sitters, and I couldn't. And I was quite astonished by this. So I approached the managing director and a man who had founded a big house sitting company, and I spoke to him about it. And his ethos was that he'd done it himself as a teenager when he didn't have much money for a family friend, and he took it from me. And since then, it's just grown enormously. But the one thing that always comes across most is we live the life of the local, and that's why I'm a fan.
I think that's a really good phrase, that living the life of a local. I think maybe a few of us, we've been on our travels and we've ended up in a 4 or 5 star hotel, and as nice as it appears, it's all rather soulless, and it doesn't seem like we know what we're doing. We're in this sort of micro world. There's a town or a city to explore, but we don't have all those insider tips. And actually, to be able to go and meet the people from a place and feel like you've got an inside track, I think is probably invaluable, really. And Janine, have you done much house sitting yourself, or is this more something you've been observing?
No, I like house sitters to come here. I've got 5 dogs, 3 cats, and 37 chickens, so I need house sitters.
And another person, I think, who has done quite a bit of house sitting herself, and in fact, so much so that she decided to start a business around it, is Lania Walker. Lania is the founder and CEO of a company called HouseSitMatch.com, which is one of our hosts today. So Lania, can you give us a little bit of context about how you found out and got into house sitting, and then what you think the opportunity is?
Well, I originally heard about house sitting when a friend of mine, an Australian friend, came to visit from Perth, Australia. She had spent a whole year house sitting and had saved about $35,000 in rent, which is an enormous amount of money.
Yeah.
And she'd originally said she wants to start an agency, and I thought, well, gosh, I've actually house sat before. Why don't we start a company together? So we did, and in effect, it's something I've done in various countries for friends looking after their properties. Sorry, there's some kind of feedback on the line.
No, man, we can hear you perfectly well. Please carry on.
Okay. So we started the website, and actually, having told friends and friends, other friends began to recommend us, and that's how the network started growing. So really, that's really how we started. And personally, I've always had somebody stay in my home to look after things, whether it's pets or the garden or the property. And what I found is that it's just the most secure way to leave your home when you go away on holiday.
Yeah.
So for me, it solved the problem.
Right, so you decided to create a business around this, and do you find that when you've got more and more people involved, that then it's no longer about, oh, here's this one person I know, here's this neighbour I ring, here's this family member. Do you find that it's actually opened up your world by being able to scale this thing up?
Well, what's fabulous is it's actually shrunk the world. So
Right.
we have people from Paris communicating with people in the Ukraine and Jamaica. It's really quite remarkable how the world has shrunk.
And is it restricted to certain countries where you can go house sitting? Are you operating it all around the world?
Yes, well, actually, we operate almost all around the world. And in fact, very soon, we'll also be operating in the US and in Canada.
Right. Okay, so we've definitely got UK, we've definitely got Australia, and we've definitely got Spain, from where we're joined today from Marbella by a chap who goes by an interesting name, David the Dogman. David has his own pets, we believe, when he's not talking on Talk Radio Europe. And David used to be a former London police officer, but he's now part of the expat community over there. He does a regular drive time radio show where he talks to listeners about their questions and pet-related issues. He's long-wing a dog owner himself. David, perhaps you could talk to us about the issues you have with being a dog owner and being able to, or indeed not being able to, leave those dogs when you go travelling.
I think the thing is, I can't go travelling at all at the moment because I've got two Rottweilers.
Right.
They're very, very well behaved, not trained by me. As soon as I say the word Rottweiler, I get ooh, ah, and then I have to say, well, they're only little. I don't know what to say, but I can't find them.
So you essentially, you've got two well-behaved pets, but you struggle to find somebody you can rely on to look after. You can rely on to look after them, despite trying in the local area. Is that right?
Anybody that would be my particular pets, they're not at all. But just say the word rock. People don't want to know.
Right.
Caroline have sent you pictures, screenshots.
Well, Ruth, we've got a very adventurous house sitter who's travelled the world and she's in France at the moment. Ruth, do you think you'd be up for the challenge of looking after a Rottweiler, particularly a well-behaved one?
Oh, I don't think there'd be a problem with that at all. I'm looking after sheep at the moment. I've looked after cats, turtles, chickens, ducks. We're looking after a quite ill chocolate Labrador right now and a few large dogs. As long as the dog, you know about the dog's temperament, and it's actually quite fine if they're well behaved. If it wasn't a well behaved dog, we'd have to discuss that, but I'm sure a well behaved dog would be a pleasure to look after. Or two, or three, or four, or five.
Right. So David, when you think about where you've looked, have you looked on one of these sorts of extended networks, or have you been more looking at in the local area around Marbella and friends and family?
Oh, no, it's only just happened to me in the last year, and I'm obviously up for getting away and getting a rest. I want to get away from the sun.
Right.
My sort of holidays are city holidays, but up to now, I haven't found anybody that I would term as suitable.
Right.
So if you the best judge.
So if you're looking for someone suitable, I mean, Lamia, you've maybe got some experience of this because you at HouseSit Match, people can talk to each other directly. But if it's a situation like David's where there's a bit of a challenge on your hands, are you able to help match someone like David up with someone like Rachel who's up for the challenge? Are you able to give some extra verification?
Well, sometimes we have very specific requirements, a bit like David. And one of the things we recommend is that they look at the experience of the sitters. And we've got a whole range of sitters who have a great deal of pet experience. We've got pet professionals who join us from vet nurse and from NARPs, from the sitters associations. So we recommend that they look at those groups. And I'm always happy to help out and perhaps point him in the right direction, depending on his requirements, of course.
Yeah, okay. Also then on our panel today, we've got Rachel Morgan Trimmer, get that one the right way around. She's the director of the Career Break site. And I think Rachel is looking at this both from a career perspective and then an affordability perspective. Rachel, you took a career break around about 2005 and set up your company. Could you just tell us a bit more about the story of that, please?
Yeah, I was working for a gap year company at the time, and I decided to take a career break because I was advising all these 18-year-olds on all these great experiences they could do, and I thought actually I'd quite like to do that myself. So I went on a 4-month trip around the world, and I found that there was not much information for career breakers. There's a lot for gappers, but when you've got a job and a house and a cat and 2 Rottweilers or whatever it might be, there's a lot more to organise. So I set up the career break site in order to give people the information that they needed in order to take a career break and go travelling or work abroad or do volunteering or whatever it might be.
And what did you find about the age group of the people you're working with?
It's creeping up. When we started, it was very much 25 to 30. That was our core. And there's still a lot of people that age who go on career breaks, but we're increasingly seeing more people who are, later on in their careers, people with kids, they take their kids with them, and of course a lot of retirees as well, like to go on long trips, the golden gappers as they're called. Golden
gappers, I like that phrase. I guess they're that's the ultimate career break, isn't it? Once you've retired.
Some people call them saga louts, but we don't really like that term.
Saga louts, goodness. I don't know. Do we have any saga louts on the panel? Anyone want to own up to that? Own up to that label? I'm sure not.
What Rachel said about the golden gap people is I am increasingly seeing that as well. People taking early retirement and can afford to take early retirement more than they had considered, simply because they're going through a house sitting thing now, rather than having to rent somewhere. So yeah, I'm definitely seeing that too.
So if you look then, Rachel, we've talked about the age group. Do you think that house sitting is a part of what people do as career breaks? How do you think that fits into the career break concept?
Well, I mean, we've talked about older people, but it's actually ideal for the under 30s as well, that big group of people. And the reason is because there's a lot available in Australia and New Zealand, which are the top destinations for career breakers.
Right.
One reason for that is because they're on most round the world tickets, but the other reason is it's so easy to work there on a working holiday visa.
Yeah.
You can work there for 1 or 2 years. UNAC have a visa that lets you work for a second year in New Zealand. And if you're staying somewhere for a year, obviously you're not going to want to rent somewhere. And a lot of people, find that they have these short-term rents or house shares, but house sitting can actually maximise the affordability, because the reason people are working when they go to these places, it's not just for the experience, but also to earn money to carry on travelling.
Yeah.
And if you're saving money by house sitting at the same time, that means you've got a lot more to carry on with. After you leave Australia or New Zealand or wherever it might be, you could go and do some volunteer work, or you could carry on travelling. So that's why house sitting fits in really well to this.
Perfect. So I think that's an interesting dilemma, isn't it? When you go house sitting, are you going to be saving money? If you can, that's great. You could possibly save, I think Lamia was saying, $35,000 a year in rent. But we've got someone on our panel who's taken that a little bit further. She goes by the name Explorer Mum. Her name is Ruth Johnston. And Ruth, I believe that you've actually gone from saving money to making a professional career out of house sitting.
Yes, pretty much. I travel with my 9-year-old son around the world. We're currently in our 29th country, and we've done many house sits from Fiji, Brazil, Ireland, now in France, going to a house sit in Turkey. We've house sat all over the place in a really broad spectrum, from something quite simple to something quite elaborate. But it's wonderful. It's given me a really rich experience. My son went to the local school in Fiji. The lady next door used to make him a lunch, so he fitted in with the locals. You experience the culture in a way that you would never experience if you're a tourist. You become a traveller, and a slow traveller, and you get to experience living life in that destination, which is just wonderful. I wouldn't change it, and I have no anticipation of stopping at the moment. If I can at all afford to keep it going, I'd like to do that.
Great. Okay. So just a word to our attendees out there today. As you're listening to the discussion from the panel, if you've got any questions that you'd like to add, there is a box on the right of your screen where you can tap in a question. I can put that straight to the panel. We've had a few sent in beforehand, which we'll go to shortly. But please do add your questions, and we will put them to the panel straight away. Going back to you then, Ruth. So you've been all around the world. It sounds really exciting. Do you get paid to do these assignments, or is it more a way to make it and just kind of this constant travelling?
But you have to look at it as a very professional experience. So in saying that you're caring for their house, their garden, their pets, some people do ask you to contribute towards utilities or to contribute towards the internet. Yes, but no, I haven't been paid, no.
Right. We are getting a little bit of feedback from you there. So if I can cut back to Rachel. Rachel, so you're involved in career breaks. Do you find that there's an element of payment here?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
So the question is about do people get paid doing the assignment? Is that commonplace, or is it more of a kind of quid pro quo type of thing?
They can vary a lot. I think with all kinds of career breaks, not just people on HouseSit, but people who get accommodation with it, with their volunteering placement or whatever it might be. We have found, until very recently, if you're leaving for your career break, you would probably have to pay a house sitter to look after your house, and it can be really expensive. It can be as much as the child investment discovered, but it's the same to look after a cat as it is for a small child.
Right. So indeed, you've got very precious family members here when it comes to things like childcare. The costs can really mount up. Lania Walker, do you think that's a problem that you've managed to solve at HouseSit Match? People, rather than paying a fee to an agency, you've actually been able to bring them together on a peer-to-peer basis. They may pay a small membership fee to someone like HouseSit Match, but then are they able to kind of come to an arrangement for themselves and avoid some of those exorbitant costs?
Well, what we recommend is that people come to their own arrangements. Generally speaking, most people don't pay for HouseSit. But it depends on the duty. Sometimes there are a great number of duties, and so really it's up to them to decide. Some owners prefer to pay a small stipend every day. I was on the phone today with a lady quite local to me. She was insistent that this was a professional role and she wants to pay somebody. So I said, well, it's up to her to discuss with the house sitter she chooses. But generally speaking, we don't really recommend that people pay. It's exchange of services, free accommodation for your experience with pets, garden, and just maintaining the home. Right.
So some interesting points there. And then I think that maybe brings us on to a couple of our questions we've had set in before time. People have asked about insurance and some of the peace of mind issues. So Maria from Northamptonshire, she has asked us, she said, panel, do I need house sitter insurance in order to house sit someone I don't know? Lamia, have you got a take on that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
The question was from Maria in Northampton, do I need house sitter insurance in order to house sit for someone I don't know?
No, you don't necessarily need house sitter insurance. It is available if that's what you want. But it's not necessary. I think you should be covered by the homeowner's insurance. And the homeowner needs to tell their insurance company and give your details. That's usually the process.
Right, great, okay. I wanted to switch back to the travel angle a second now. Janine Marsh, you're here from the member of the British Guild of Travel Writers. I'd like to ask you and then maybe go round the panel, asking really just which are your favourite countries perhaps? Are there 2 or 3 places that you find this works really well on your travels?
Well, for me, obviously, I'm going to France because that's the area of food. But actually, it's such a huge country with so many opportunities that you can go south to north and feel like you're included country. I've actually made quite a good friend with a lady who uses HouseSit in my area, which is and actually, Lamia, going back to the question, she does pay her house sitters if they occupied while she's away. She will put into that. If they're not, then she doesn't. And yes, use it as a cultural exchange as well.
All right, thanks, Janine. We are having a few issues hearing clearly. Maybe go back to Rachel. Rachel, if you look at the top countries that you've been to, I think you mentioned Australia. Which are the top 5 countries where house sitting works really well?
Australia and New Zealand, obviously.
Yeah.
USA, Spain, you mentioned. I think anywhere in Europe would be good because obviously for British people it's easy to work there, and going back to the angle of working while you travel and wanting to stay somewhere. And obviously in Europe as well, people are going there to learn the language, and you can't do that in 2 weeks. So if you're going there to, as people have said, live like a local, get to know the culture, feel like you're at home in a place, any European country where you're able to work would be a great place for house sitting.
Right. So Lamia, do you have a sense on what house sit match is? What are the sort of top 10 countries that you're dealing with in order?
Well, the UK and Australia are very popular, as is France. These seem to be the most popular countries. Certainly in our short history, we've only been around for about 16 months. They seem to be the top 3.
Right. And then Explore a Mum, you've been to 26 or more countries. Which have been your favourites, do you think, from a pet sitting experience?
I think Fiji was definitely my favourite. There we just had a couple of cats to look after. It was an idyllic situation. Probably my next favourite would be the one we did in Ireland, because the dog was just almost like family by the time we left. Just really loved the time we had with the dog, and just the country feel was fantastic.
Right, okay, so Ireland's looking good. Question come in from Jenny. She's in High Wycombe, and the question from Jenny was about the role of social media in finding a house sitter and pet. I guess there's a few dimensions here. One is that there's potentially a social network pre-baked like HouseSit Match, and the other is that you may use groups on Twitter and Facebook. We've got some really expert panelists on this. If we go to Janine, what about the role of social media, do you think, in finding these assignments?
I think it's really, really important and a growing thing as well. When I spoke to Lania a few weeks ago, she mentioned she had some really fantastic house sits in Paris and Nice. So I asked some of my friends, and this was just a small group, and the response was absolutely amazing. And many of them had never even heard of house sitting, but all of them said they were joining up. So I think it's absolutely critical.
So there's maybe a bit of an element there of a critical mass, you think? If you get enough people in one place to share their experiences, then the value can go up.
Yes, I think word of mouth is really important on this. If you speak to someone who's done it and they're really positive about it, then you're going to consider it far more. And if you put that on social media, then the word spreads very, very quickly.
And Ruth Johnston, Explore a Mum, and I believe Explore a Son as well. So you're you're a real content creator in this space, and you share your travels with the world. What kind of interactions do you get with that? How does it fuel where you're going next?
Well, I'm a professional blogger, so I definitely incorporate it into my blogging as well. And I constantly get asked the question, how do you afford to travel long term and keep going, I guess, on a budget? Because my budget's quite small, being a single mother. But as far as that goes, I am very loose with where I want to go next, and I guess that enables me to be able to look at various house sits and think, well, I might consider this one, we might consider certain seasons, or we might want to have a white Christmas and a hot January, and we're able to do that because house sitting gives us that affordability to save what we would be spending on hotels or hostels, and then save that money and then be able to use that for other things like the travel to get us between those two places.
So do you use your blog effectively to line up your next gig?
No, not at all. Definitely Lamia and has been a great assistant with being able to shoot me ones. We're talking about one at the moment that I might be able to do for the new year with her, with one of her clients, which is fantastic for me. And I really I guess I look at being a bit trigger happy. And so you've got to be the first, be in there with the first lot of people that apply quite often to be able to be successful. But also I guess I've got a good CV as far as house sitting is concerned, because I've been doing it for so long that I can actually present really good references to people, and I'm looked at being trustworthy. I have a very high standard that I leave a house in, and I have some very good tips. I take photographs and I communicate well with the people that I house sit for. So that also assists me, but I don't actually use the blog for it. But I have been approached through different house sit sites to house sit, and most of them I've had to turn down because I'm not in that area at the time.
Brilliant, right, thanks. And then Rachel Morgan Trimmer, you're there. How do you recommend that people build their profile in order to get a house sit?
You mean in terms of, people finding them?
Yeah, yes. I mean, you're helping people to formulate their career break.
Yeah.
Do you think it takes a bit of? We've talked about with somebody like Ruth. Clearly, she's travelling all over the world all the time. She's going to have a lot of good references. But if you're somebody getting into this as a new person, how do you recommend you kind of get going with these alternative forms of house sitting or whatever it might be to start off your career break?
Well, obviously, everybody's got to start somewhere. I mean, everybody has to do their first house sit. Things like personal references can count for a lot.
Yeah.
We recommend things like, taking the time to plan, and don't just rock up thinking that you're going to be able to get a house sit, because there is a certain amount of competition for good places, obviously, like there is with jobs, because we find it tends to be with more younger people. They don't necessarily think about all the different things that could happen, and they could be down bad, because if you're going on your career break, you're quite often excited and you don't necessarily want to consider the pitfalls, like the fact that people might not want you to house sit if you have no experience with animals. So we would recommend talking to people like Lamia who have a lot of experience with house sits, and obviously Explorer Mum as well, using those tips, using the information that's out there to help them plan their trip properly and to help them get a house sit.
Great. All right. Well, we've got lots of questions coming through from the attendees at the web conference, so thanks for those. Please keep them coming through. We've got questions coming up from Florian, from Tina, and from Karen. Just because I've heard that there's quite a big football game on tonight, something to do with Argentina and Holland, and people may be going off to watch that. So we're going to go to those questions very shortly. But I just want to make sure for those of you who've been patiently working your way through the webinar that they know about some of the things that are coming as a result of the webinar. And one of them, I think, Lamia from HouseSit Match has is it a special offer for us, Lamia? A special code if you want to get involved? So maybe you could, if you want to tell us about that now, and then we'll go to some questions.
Yes, for 24 hours only, we're going to have a special registration offer, 20% off any registrations, but it's just 24 hours after the webinar.
So how do people access this special offer?
Well, at the end of the webinar, we will post up the webinar code for the voucher. And all you do is when you register, you post that code into the registration form, and it will deduct 20% from the cost of whichever subscription you take.
Right, okay, sounds good. So if you'd like to reveal, if you let me know when you're ready to reveal that code and when it's ready to go, then the members of the public will find that one out. We've got some questions now then. So the first one is from Florian S. I believe he is a house sitter of note himself. His question is, what security precautions should a homeowner take So, for instance, he said, should they be asking the house sitter for police checks and maybe a copy of passports? Ruth Johnston, Explorer Mum, what kind of references do you get asked for? Do you get asked for police checks and passport copies?
I usually offer them up front. I've only ever had one person actually individually contact each person in writing, which I found quite interesting. And but I always offer them, and I do have references in writing that I would just give them when we get to that point that we've had a discussion and I'm the person that they seek for that house sit, then I would offer those to them. Yes, I have been asked.
Right. Anybody else? We've got a house sitter there in Janine. What have you been asked for, Janine, when you've got involved with this sort of thing?
Most people do want a reference. Most people want to do a Skype interview as well, and actually I really thoroughly recommend that for both parties, that both the house sitter and the sittee speak to each other, and Skype is a great way to do it because we see each other and it just adds a personal connection, or at the very least, a phone call.
Right.
If I can interject, I actually think you get a really good feel when you Skype somebody that you're house sitting for. You get to talk about things and you get a really good feel of what their personality is like and what their expectations are, so that you're not going into something blind.
Great. And Lamia, do you have an experience there on these sorts of police checks, passport checks? House Sit Match, what sort of support do you provide people so they know what they've got to do?
Well, we provide guidelines, and very much, as everyone has said today, we do recommend that people take up references, but most of all, get to know the person if you possibly can. I think the Skype call is really, really useful. You get to understand a little bit more about them, hear in their own words their history, what they're interested in. It just really helps. Of course, you can also do social media checks. Everything's fairly transparent these days. And police checks, of course, are also useful. Certainly when I house sit, I always have my police checks ready and my references ready also.
Okay, good. So we've now got a question coming through from Karen. I believe Karen is in the northeast of England, in Newcastle, and she'd like to know, if I am house sitting for a long duration in an exotic location, and she wants to visit nearby tourist sites, is it okay for me to stay away overnight or for a few nights? So the question, I guess, is you may have a base in the house sitting location. What if you're also doing other travelling? How does that work with the host? Well, Explorer Mum, maybe you might know about this. Do you feel that when you go house sitting somewhere, do you feel kind of stuck in that location, or are you able to be kind of flexible and get about still?
I think if you are looking after pets, you have a responsibility, and you've taken on an assignment that you are responsible for those pets, and you need to work in the time frame that suits the homeowner. So if it's a cat that can be fed once a day, well, then you've got more flexibility to go out all day long and explore the world. When we were in Fiji, we only had 2 cats that we fed once a day, and it was quite fine to go and hire a 4-wheel drive and go to the other side of the island. Very, very fine. But when here, for example, we're looking after a dog that has medication requirements, we're not able to do that. We can go out for a few hours a day, but there's so many beautiful hamlets we can explore within a few hours. That is also fine. But you can't go off. It's rare that you could go off overnight because that person is wanting you to care for their property. So it does limit you in that aspect. You need to be doing your touring before you start the house sit and at the end of the house sit if it's for that area.
That makes sense. So we're actually, it does take that bit more planning, you're saying, but if you plan well, a bit like that, if I've ever been on a business trip or a holiday, it's great if you can combine the two. So I think it's just about getting it all set up in advance. But we've got a question now from Tina. Hi, Tina. She's just asking us, does anyone know about who is responsible for paying bills and other expenses? So food for animals, vet service, etc. Is there a float ready? What's the standard? What would you say, Lamia?
I think it depends on the agreement the house sitter comes to with the homeowner. In many cases, I think if it's a long house sit, the homeowner often asks that there is a contribution towards the utility bills. And then regarding when there are pets involved, often the homeowner will provide the pet food. So that's usually what happens. But again, it depends on the situation. Again, Ruth may have a different experience, but that's in my experience.
For me, I've always found that the homeowner will provide adequate food up front for the pet. It's usually there in advance for us. In this situation, we have a sick dog that we are going to have to take to the vet next week, but the homeowner has actually organised with the vet that they will pay the bill when they come back, and that has been pre-arranged, and any medication requirements obviously will be paid by the owner. I've never ever been asked to pay for an animal or for the responsibilities. I have been asked to pay for utilities in Fiji, which I think was something like $12 a week, ridiculously low. I've been asked to pay internet because I do extensive blogging. That was agreed upon, and I think that's perfectly understandable. So there are some. However, you might find that there are some unreasonable requests that some people may want you, like a maintenance person with full-on labour for 8 hours a day. So you need to be setting up what you expect in advance with that communication with that homeowner. How many hours a day do they require you to be working on the property? What do they expect from you? Get that in writing, get that agreement sorted out so there's no nasty surprises for either party.
Yeah, thanks for that then, Ruth. And we've got a question actually from Florian about contracts in a second. But before we go to Florian's question, I'd just like to ask Lania, I believe now the special webinar link has just gone live on the HouseSit Match site. Would you just like to tell us a bit more about this and the opportunity maybe to save a little bit of extra money today on house sitting?
Yes, well, there's a special offer for the webinar, and everyone who's either subscribed or joined us today, there's a special 20% off any subscription that you take out within the next 24 hours. And all you have to do is, when you go to register and you're asked for a coupon code, you quote webinar-20, and webinar is in capital letters. And everyone on the screen now should be able to see the admin notice. It's a special sticky note, and it says webinar-20, and it'll give you 20% off.
Right, so that sounds like a great opportunity to get involved with house sitting. I believe also, Lania, is it true that if you're a homeowner and you're actually willing to look at having someone in your property, there's no charge at all, is there, initially, to join this house sitting network?
Well, that's true. We have a special 6 months pre-registration. It's an introductory offer, really, as we're a new company. We're looking to introduce the way we do things to a new community. So we welcome all homeowners with a 6 months pre-registration. Right.
And the other thing, I think, the other bonus of joining a network like this is that you do get some of the contractual support. The question from Florian was, he was saying that he knows contracts are available, these sort of template model contracts are there for use between home sitters and homeowners. Do you think people actually use these in real life, or do they change them?
Absolutely. I get asked all the time about these legal documents. And just a quick word about them. We've actually invested into creating special house-sitting contracts, legal agreements, and they're templates that can be adapted by you, of course, but they were written in country by lawyers. So in the UK, in Australia, specifically for the purpose of being used as a house-sitting agreement. And they're in PDF form, but you can ask for the Word document if you want to adapt it. But they have been written especially by lawyers and used by our network.
And Rachel Morgan-Trimmer, director of the Career Break site, do you find that people are using these model contracts, and is that the sort of advice that you're able to give people?
We tell everyone to always get everything in writing, whether it's a house-sitting agreement or a sabbatical agreement with your job to guarantee you have a job to come back to. If you've got things in writing, not only have you got proof, but you can also remember and have the other party remember what you actually agreed to. Sure. Because we talk about things like some people leave their car behind and need somebody to drive it. And you might have, I said before, that you have to plan for eventualities that you might not want to think about. So if you've got something in writing, you've at least got a record of what you've all agreed to. We think it's really important.
Sure. And how do people find your career break site, Rachel? Where do they go online to get all this great advice?
It's thecareerbreaksite.com.
Right.
Easy to remember.
That's nice. Thecareerbreaksite.com, everybody. And are you on Twitter, Rachel, as well?
Yes, we're on Twitter at careerbreaksite.
Right. Great. Okay. And going back then to Ruth, you've done quite a few of these. You said, oh my goodness, here's another contract, I've got to go again. Or have you got it down to fine art yet? Are you using these model templates?
I think that I'm really appreciative that I've got in touch with Lamia, because I really like working with her company, because she actually has the edge on this that other house sitting sites aren't providing at that stage. She seems to be more advanced and more professional. I really appreciate that, because I have had a couple of ones that have had nasty surprises for me. And if it is in writing and these contracts are necessary for, you're paying, if you're a house sitter and you're paying to fly $1,000 or $2,000 to get yourself to a country, you don't want to get there and have someone cancel your house sit. You want to have steps put in place. What happens if something goes wrong on either party side? Emergencies can happen, and we have to prepare for those. And that's just a professional responsibility for both parties on both sides. So it is important.
Right. And how do people, if they've got those questions for you, it sounds like you're a real expert, how would they find you at Explore a Mum? What's the best way of getting in contact on social media or on your blog?
My website is explorermum.com, with Explorer with an A. Right. And I'm on Facebook as Explorer Mum and Explorer Son, and I'm quite easy to find, I guess. And we can also you can contact me through Lamia if you needed to. But I'd love to have any opportunities to answer questions for people. Part of my journey also, I have found, is that I had very limited information when I started, and also very limited support. People thought I was crazy doing what I was going to do with my son, and I didn't tell a lot of people until I had that structure in place. But also, even with travelling, I found such a limited amount of information, and people are so close-knit, they don't want to tell you information like it's the Secret Seven. I don't want to be like that. Right. I actually want to encourage single mothers to travel. That's a big part of my journey, is that you can get out there, you can change your life, and being a single mother is not a dead-end situation. It is an opportunity that you can have the most incredible time, and that this world is a wonderful place. And I'd love to support anybody I can with that. So if they can talk to me, I'm more than merrier with it.
Lovely. Janine Marsh, you're here from the British Guild of Travel Writers, editor-in-chief also for thegoodlifefrance.com, I believe. Have you written about Explore a Mum, or you must have found some other very interesting characters on your journey? Tell us about a few of them.
I think I'm going to be in touch with you after this.
Right. New story idea.
So one of our big things is to tell people the opportunities there are there, and I absolutely agree with you, Ruth. It's not about keeping it to yourself; it's about sharing opportunities with other people, and that's certainly what we're all about as well. So, yeah.
So where do we find you, Janine, or online or on social media?
On social media, on Facebook, I'm The Good Life France, and on Twitter, I am French Janine. So.
At French Janine, right, and The Good Life France, perfect. We've got a question here from Karen in Newcastle. She's getting very excited about the opportunity for house sitting. She's already mentioned that she might be off to Australia or Jamaica soon. I guess the question is, and maybe for Lamia, is how, if we look at it from the homeowner angle, how are you comfortable with having someone in your home to keep an eye on things? What makes you ready to go from that sense?
Well, I'll give you an example. This summer, we're going away for a couple of weeks, and I've been very lucky through the site to meet a couple from Australia, from Melbourne. Actually, they were homeowners last year who registered with us, and this year they're coming over to the UK for 3 months. And what I've done is we've had a month and a half to get to know each other. So we've emailed, I've seen references written, I've also called a couple of their friends just to have a chat with them, and everything tallied. Everything that they had said tallied with what the friends said. I didn't actually ask for police checks in this case because she's a teacher and is exposed to children, and also he's an academic, and his professional sort of history, if you like, is all online. So I've had other ways to become familiar with them and their work. However, they're arriving in the UK a couple of weeks before they come to our house, so we're going to meet over dinner. And then they're going to come and spend a day and an evening before we leave. So again, get to know us, get to know the house, the routines, and so on. So that's, if you like, the process that I like to go through. Really become familiar with the person, apart from the references and so on, which I think are important. Just get to know the individual. Keep the communications open. That's the most important thing.
That's an interesting one, perhaps for you, Ruth. Then this idea of some sort of transitory period when you arrive, or to get to know people. Do you normally turn up to an empty house, or do you find that you find that there is this kind of getting to know people first?
The best situation definitely is if you have a handover period. In this example here with the house I'm looking after in France, we came the night before. It was fortunate they had a camper van or motorhome they were going to be off in, so they got to stay in the motorhome and we were actually staying in the house. Because there's quite a few animals we're looking after, we had that morning and evening agenda we needed to familiarise ourselves with. So we were able to do that, share a really lovely meal with them the night before they left. And then they left. So that was a really, really good opportunity. But I really like to meet them in advance if I can. Sometimes there seems to be a situation where there isn't a handover at the end because you've got to go and catch a flight, or they're coming in late that evening, something like that. That does occasionally happen. There is no end handover, but I've even met homeowners at the airport. We've been flying out, they've been flying in, and we might have a cup of coffee, something like that.
And do you find that you get many repeat gigs? Have you been asked to go back to the same place, or are you always looking for the next exciting challenge?
I guess because the world's such a big place and there's so many countries I wish to see, that as yet I haven't gone back to any. I did in Australia, yes, I did. But as far as overseas, I have been asked to go back to the Fiji one, and I've had to decline because I'm not going in that direction. Today I got asked to HouseSit in Botswana, of all places, but I'm probably not heading to Africa for quite a period of time yet, unfortunately. So I've said, don't close the door, maybe another time. And I like to try and say, well, I don't know where I'll be later on, but that's a possibility. So, but the world is so huge, and the more you travel, the more there is to see.
Right, okay. And then Janine Marsh from the British Guild of Travel Writers. I mean, what have you heard? What are the most exotic countries you've heard that people getting involved in these sorts of activities, living like a local? Have you met anyone who's gone to Botswana or to parts of Africa?
On the beach at Antigua, Barbados, a place where people could see whales from the shore, from the bedroom of their house. Yes, some really, really beautiful and exotic places that you can go to. There's no doubt. I mean, it opens up a whole new horizon beyond most of our capability in terms of finance and stuff like that. So yes, I think you can look for somewhere a bit different and go somewhere you would never normally be able to go. So for me, it really opens up opportunities there.
Lovely. And then Rachel Morgan Trimmer from the Career Break site. How do you think people transition from what almost sounds like a dream fantasy life of house sitting and then perhaps going back into the real world of work? Is this something people go, oh dear, there's a bit of a gap on your CV here, or is it actually a net positive if you're trying to go back into the job market?
Well, we sometimes call a career break a career step because we find that the experience people have when they go travelling, if they're working or volunteering or even house sitting, it shows that you're responsible, people trust you, and as well as the experience that you've got while you've been on your career break, you also find that simply having the initiative and get up and go and do something that other people don't do makes you stand out above other job seekers when you come back and start looking for a job again. But having said that, a lot of people now go on sabbaticals that they're actually coming back to the same job.
Right. Okay. So it's given them an interesting experience. And how do they share those experiences? Do you recommend people blog or tweet? Or do you think, or is it something that they kind of share among their friends?
Well, a lot of people now taking career breaks like to make more of it than they used to. Some people might take a travel photography course or a travel writing course before they go, start blogging, sometimes see where it gets them. Because, having some time out to focus on this sort of thing away from your day job can be really good at honing those skills.
Lovely. What about that then, Lamia? Do you think you've got a how would you break down your demographics at HouseSit Match?
Well, initially when I started this, I thought we'd have a lot of young people leaving university, trying to do some kind of gap year. But I've been pleasantly surprised by the range of ages, different backgrounds people have. We have all kinds of professionals. We have all kinds of mid-career professionals. We've got a lot of retired people who just decide, they're cashed up, they want to go see the world, they're active, they're empty nesters. Where now? That's the question. Where now? So, they have a lot more to give, a lot of energy, and really the world is their oyster. So it crosses all generations and all backgrounds. I cannot put my finger on any particular group that seems to prefer this over another.
Would you say that you have to give different levels of service to different people? Is there a sort of basic level service where they can just have access to the listings? Is there one where you help out more with references, with advice?
Well, we do have a structure to the level of service. We have different sized ads. So the smallest ad is a listing with 150 words and 1 or 2 pictures. And then the service goes up from there. So the size of the ad will increase. But if you take a premium membership, then I am more than happy to help with profile listings. I can even suggest people who might be in the area who are available. I'm happy to help out. Really, just get in touch. That's the main thing.
And it sounds like even with some of the most experienced people, like Explore Mum here, actually that personal service can make a big difference.
Well, I like to take an interest. So if I know that she's headed in a particular direction, and I hear a chateau in the south of France she might like, then she's on my list.
Very good. And you're at HouseSit Match Towers at the moment, Lamia, but where are you heading next on your travels?
Well, we're actually heading to Northumberland. So we'll be staying in a cottage up there. But actually, we've just house-sat in Paris, and that was rather fabulous.
Ooh la la. Right. Well, so a reminder then, if you are looking to get involved with this new world of house sitting, there is this coupon code only available for the next 24 hours. It is in capitals webinar-20 at housesitmatch.com. So I think there's actually an opportunity there to get one of the premium packages, but at an economy price. So who can argue with that? Thanks very much. We're coming to the end of our hour now. Thanks very much to all our panellists. A special thank you to David the Dogman from Talk Radio Europe. I think he's had to go and look after his Rottweilers and must have dropped off, but you can catch his show, David the Dogman, where he'll speak to pets and listen to their concerns. There's an episode online at mixcloud.com/HouseSitMatch where he interviewed Lamia, and Lamia got very much grilled on the concept of house sitting, but survived to tell the tale, and she joined us today. I'd like to thank Rachel Morgan Trimmer from the Career Break site, some really fantastic resources there, and you can go and find her at the Career Break site. Also, special thank you to Explorer Mum. She's probably already off now planning the next trip. She's in France at the moment. Where next then, Ruth? Where's the next destination?
We're going to Morocco.
Oh, you said that very nonchalantly. Right. And also a big thanks to Janine Marsh, one of the first people to pick up on this whole concept of house sitting. Where's your next destination, Janine?
Champagne.
Champagne. The Champagne region of France, is that? Or a glass? Lovely. All right. So a quick reminder then that the coupon code on the website, it's webinar-20. There will be a replay of this house sitting webinar available online. We will send that round to all the attendees. I've been Thomas Mason. You can check me on Twitter also at Thomas Mason on Twitter if you've got any questions you'd like me to put back to the panellists. And HouseSit Match is also on Twitter at HouseSitMatch, all one word. And HouseSitMatch.com is obviously the website. We hope also that we can make this a regular thing. This is the first webinar we've done with a really great panel of people from all over Europe and around the world. So we've really enjoyed bringing you all together. Please do, as an audience member, we hope you've managed to get your questions. If there's any still to come, you can give us an email at events@housesitmatch.com, and we will bear them in mind for a future webinar. Thank you. I just allow Lamia also from HouseSit Match to say goodbye and conclude proceedings.
Well, thank you everyone for taking part. It's been really, really exciting. A little rough start with the technology, but hopefully we got it down pat in the end. And I really want to make a special thanks for the panel. I know you took time out of your day and your evening, so I really appreciate it.